website. And my name is David Corbin. I'm the chair of the legislative committee for the Nebraska Chapter Sierra Club. And just to let you know, the way this works is that we have our own lobbyist, and I'm going to introduce him in a few minutes. And we have a legislative committee. We go through all the bills. There's over 680 of them. And tonight we're just going to go through the ones that we have prioritized and where we stand and why we stand. And Al Davis, our lobbyist, will be explaining that to you, what we're doing. But you should see on your screen, I have a link to our Sierra Club website, and I hope that people visit there, because I've actually also linked on today's meeting, which is over on the right-hand corner on the web page. There is a link to the document you're seeing before you now. So you don't have to write anything down. Anything you see on here is available to you to download as a Word document. I'll also point out our Facebook page. We try to keep up to date on things that are happening locally and as well as nationally. And then we have, this is our Twitter address. And then some of these other things that we'll see down here, I'm going to be talking about later, or when we talk about the meat ethanol plant and those bills, I'll just refer that link to you. My contact information is there, as is Al Davis's. So now I would like to introduce our new lobbyist, Al Davis. Al Davis has a ranch in Hyannis, Nebraska. He was elected to the legislature in 2013, served from 2013 to 2017, is noted for working across the aisle in bipartisan issues. And he's also been active as a board member of the Farmers Union. And so I'm going to turn it over to Al to add anything else that he would like to say in ways of introduction to of him to those of you who are on this meeting. You ready, Al?
Thank you, David. I appreciate the introduction. I thought I would tell you a little bit about myself first. And this virtual background is our ranch in Hyannis. We actually live in Cherry County, which you may or may not know is where there are 28 mother cows for every resident of the county. So it's a very heavily agricultural area and beautiful. Of course, the home of the Niobrara River, not where we are, but I mean, the whole county is a beautiful part of the state. So in my prior life, I was a rancher out there, served on a number of different organizations and committees. You know, I was on the school board for a number of years, so I kind of had a grasp of educational issues and funding, which was always a big part of representing rural Nebraska's state aid to schools. And I was one of the charter members of the Independent Cattlemen of Nebraska, which is an organization of basically cow-calf people put together to try to sort of change some of the dynamics of what's happening in the cattle industry in terms of concentration issues and those sorts of things. So I have my hand in a lot of different pots. I really enjoyed getting to know the people with the Sierra Club who I've been working with. It's been a real honor and a privilege, and it's a smart group of dedicated and intelligent people who are driving the wagon here for you all. So I appreciate that. I thought I would just kind of run through some of these bills and give you a little bit of an update about what they are and why we prioritize them. Some of them might look like sort of strange choices, but you know, it was done by a committee, and many of these issues rose to the top from not just an environmental perspective, but from a perspective of environmental justice and social justice and those sort of things that are becoming more important as we move forward. So the first bill is one by Senator Slama. It's LB 76. Senator Slama, if you recall, was running in a very contentious race for re-election. She was an appointee when Dan Watermeyer moved over to the Public Service Commission, and Senator Slama was appointed by the governor. She and her opponent were in a very ugly match in southeast Nebraska, and Senator Salama was the winner. She has been known to be a senator who takes a lot of her lead from the governor's office, and I think this bill is one of those. So this is the bill that moves the state back to winner take all for our electoral votes. Back in the 1991, I believe it was, Senator Diana Shimmick convinced the legislature that it would just make sense to let the congressional districts cast their electoral votes based on the congressional district vote. Diana will tell you, she said, I thought it would never happen that we would ever elect a Democrat in the state of Nebraska, but lo and behold, it has happened now twice. The first time with Obama, and then the second time with Biden this time around. So it is a very sore spot for the Republican Party in this state. The bill was up when I was in the legislature, and there was a lot of pressure. I voted for it at the time, although I never believed in it. I thought that the way Senator Shimmick put it forward was a good and logical approach. But I had a lot of pressure, so I voted for it. It did not go anywhere. It hasn't gone anywhere since because there has been an ability to filibuster the bill. But there's a new effort to get rid of it now. What I've always said about it was, if you were a Republican in California, you were just as disenfranchised as a Democrat in Nebraska. So, you know, it's not any sort of an issue that either party that's in the minority wants to have the right. But we just happen to be a heavily Republican party, and it was embarrassing to the governor that Omaha voted for Biden. So that's that bill. We took a position in opposition to it. It will go before the government committee. It has not been scheduled yet. Had two co-sponsors, Senator Merman from Glenville, Nebraska, and Senator Lindstrom. Many of you may know that Senator Lindstrom is going to run for governor, so I'm guessing that he was trying to oil the wheels a little bit with the party. The next bill that we agreed to support, was Senator Vargas's bill, which is to adapt meatpacking employees' COVID-19 protections. There are a number of co-signers to that: Senator Sanders, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, Senator Aguilar, Brandt, Matt Hansen, Senator Walz, Senator Wayne, Senator Pansy Brooks, Senator McDonald, Senator Lathrop, and Senator Hunt. I won't go through all these co-signers when I do this, but I thought I would hit some of the high points. This is a bill that you probably all know that Senator Vargas's father was a victim of COVID, and you know, he represents a part of the city of Omaha where a lot of meatpacking employees work. So he had a really vested interest in putting forward something like this, and it is a fairly sweeping bill. It applies to any meatpacking industry with over 100 employees. Poultry, meat, and eggs are all included in the bill. Also, if there are independent contractors that happen to be working for that meatpacking plant, they are covered also. I'll just kind of run through some of the objectives of it, and I would suggest everybody read it if you want to make a comment on it, because you know the points are in there. But it requires a 6-foot radius around every employee, some plastic barriers. It applies to the whole plant: the lunchroom, the locker rooms, the break rooms, the bathrooms. Requires face masks and shields, and they must be free and given out every day on a daily replacement. They are required to be worn. If an employee wants to have gloves, he is to ask the employer, and access to those is free. Hand sanitizer and soap, obviously, those sort of things that save lives. Cleaning the workstations every shift. Ventilation systems need to be tested with filtration in all areas of the plant. They do screening on a regular basis every day and in and out. If an employee is sick, he is to be quarantined at home, but with pay. And then there's a lot of tracking information. The violations of the bill, there are, trying to think of the word I want to use here. No notification on inspections, which means that an inspector can come into the plant without letting them know. And then the first fine is $5,000 and the second fine is $50,000. So I think Senator Vargas really means business with the bill. It will be interesting to see how this plays out in the body, because the pro-business people may have some heartburn with it, but we've certainly seen the losses in the packing industry and the workers over the last year and a half. So I think it's going to have I think it has a fairly good chance of passage. Any questions about that?
Al, I just want to add to that some of you may recall that early in the days, meatpack workers were classified as essential workers. And so they really didn't have the opportunity. If they said, no, they're not going to go to work, then they could be fired. So that was part of it too. So as a public health person myself, this is something that we've been interested in quite a while.
I think it's a good bill. I think Senator Vargas is going to need a lot of help from people. And so if the Sierra Club members are going to be active on a bill, this is one that I think he could really use some help with. It goes to the Business and Labor Committee. Obviously, if you get it out to the floor, it'll have full debate. And I think that's where I think the attempts will be to bottle it up in committee if they're going to do that. I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see the fines reduced as a committee amendment if the bill can come out. Hopefully Senator Vargas can muster enough support on the committee to move it out.
So are there any questions?
Yes, we've had a question about where to find the document, which I believe is on the website, and someone has asked, can it be sent to every member?
Yes, I have up there all of the bills, not just the priority ones that we took a stand on. That's on our website. But also I will add the link to the legislative page, and all you have to do is type in the bill number and you will be able to see the entire bill.
Any other questions on that particular bill or any others? So then I'll talk about Senator McAllister's bill, which is the Renewable Energy Standards Act. It goes to the Natural Resources Committee. It's LB 266, David? I can't read it quite.
Yes, 266.
266. So the co-signer is Michaela Cavanaugh, another Omaha senator. So when I read through the bill, it generally it kind of runs through a lot of the reasons why we all think that renewable energy is the key to the future and why we need to develop clean energy in Nebraska. So there's a preamble basically that discusses those reasons. I was not surprised to see nuclear included as one of the options, but it was included in there. So in discussing the types of energy, it goes through, the solar and wind and all the different options. One that is excluded is waste incineration, which I was sort of surprised about. The goal of the bill is to be net zero by 2050 for public power. The caveat to that is that there is an escape clause for the public power entity if it doesn't think that it can get to that level by 2050. We've heard a lot of positive talk from public power about where they'll be in 10 or 20 or 30 years. But, the proof is in the pudding, and it really is going to require people like you all to, keep the pressure on them in order to move in that direction. And I think that the people that have been elected to the boards in the last couple of years are certainly much more inclined to be supporters of renewables than the people that were on the board before. So we're moving in the right direction, but we need to keep going with that and not let up on pressure. Goes to natural resources. Unfortunately, the Natural Resources Committee is a very difficult committee. most of the people there are either complete climate deniers or something else. It's hard for me to get my head around why they feel the way they do, because some of them live in parts of the state where renewable energy could be constructed and would be a huge revenue generator for those counties and create jobs in parts of the state where we don't have them. But, you know, they're flat earthers. They don't believe in it. So getting it out of committee, I think, will be a very, very significant challenge.
And I see that OPPD Director Williams is on, and just to point out that OPPD has already set their standards to meet by 2050, and Lincoln Electric System has set them for 2040, I believe. So and NPPD, the largest one, has yet to set those, but we're hoping that they will. But then there's all those others in the state that this could apply to.
You know, one of the problems that we have is that the REAs have really stuck with coal. You know, they're not receptive, not interested in developing renewables. And you know,
Al, some people might not know what an REA is.
So there are two types of, so REAs are rural electrification agencies or associations. They were designed in the 30s to provide power. So they're sort of a public power entity also, but in large part, they are wholesalers. They buy the power from NPPD as an example, and then they market it to farmers and ranchers or small communities out in the state. There are two types. One is a co-op type, and then one is just a straight REA. Good enough explanation on that, David?
Well, does an REA, since they're just buying it from NPPD, if NPPD sets a goal of, let's say, 2050, then the REAs would be forced to be using renewables. Is that true?
Yes, it is true, but you know, you do have issues like, and I can't remember the name of that REA. There's one up in Northeast Nebraska that broke the contract with NPPD and bought coal from some company down in, I believe, Kentucky. Maybe Mr. Williams knows a little more about that than I do. So
I don't. I'm sorry, I don't know that one particular, Al, but yeah, they would be allowed to contract their energy from another location. So, for example, a part of the Nebraska City 2 plant is contracted to other entities outside of Nebraska. And in the same way, entities within Nebraska can contract their power from places outside. So they have contracts. A large majority of that does come from NPPD, but they could purchase from somewhere else. And I mean, in theory, you could try and buy coal somewhere else, but renewables getting very, very cost competitive. So the reasons to try and stick with coal, if renewable is going to be as competitive, that's going to be shrinking in the future.
Well, I would certainly hope so. And, you know, they have come a long, long way since I was in the legislature, because NPPD was really not very green energy friendly at that time. And they are, I think, starting to see the writing on the wall. So if there are any other questions about that, if not, I'll move on. The next bill that we are supporting is Senator Brandt's bill. What it does is it changes provisions of the Nebraska Meat and Poultry Inspection Law. I was on a call with the Center for Rural Affairs last evening where we kind of went through all the positives and negatives of this bill. But from the Sierra Club's perspective, there are two reasons we are supporting this. One is that Senator Brandt has traditionally been a good friend of ours and has bills or has an approach that is somewhat different than a lot of the senators. So he's he scratched his back and he will scratch yours sometimes. So he had asked me if I would testify on this bill for him as a Sierra Club member, and I cleared that with the board. One of the reasons that I think this is a very important move is that the existing structure for meat packing really restricts the ability of a consumer to go out and buy poultry or meat from a rancher. You can do it in theory, but you have to buy a fairly significant amount, and in order to do that, the rancher has to make sure that it's packaged properly. So this bill is the way this gets around that, a consumer can say to a rancher, or a rancher can say to a consumer, I'm going to sell you a share in my herd. And so that share, we'll say, I'll sell you 1,000 shares in my herd. Each share is worth 10 cents. So that's $100 of invested. So then that animal can be processed and killed, and the individual who has the shares can go in and use those shares to buy the product from that individual. So the idea is it will give people flexibility. Small consumers who don't have a freezer to store a whole or a half an animal, can buy a couple steaks or some hamburgers. The other option for this is state meat inspection. That's a bill that Senator Brewer has put forward. And the issue with that is that state meat inspection, according to USDA standards, requires a higher level of coordination than federal inspection. So, the standards are a little bit higher, as equal to or higher. With federal inspection, the inspection is paid for by the USDA. Not so with the state inspection. You'd have to do that through your own funds. So you would end up obviously with some sort of cash fund paid by the people who are engaged in that. We just think it might be too expensive, but Senator Brewer's bill calls for a study, and then that will be coming out on, I believe, in December of 22. So Senator Brandt also has introduced LB 396, which is the Farm to School Program Act. I can't read my writing about half the time. So what the idea here is we're going to link farms and schools so that we can put together food that can move from the farms to the schools, keeping it local, keeping it minimally processed with healthy eating habits. It will help farm income, and it's kind of modeled on the community garden piece, I think, in a lot of ways. I think it calls for one coordinator at the state and $100,000 in appropriation every year, just basically to pay for that. We have seen how farmers markets are growing because people are really interested in buying local food. It certainly has a greener impact. It's less processed and less hydrogenized, and I think that both of these bills will be good for rural Nebraska. I'll say that. LB 482, it was introduced by Senator John Kavanaugh. This is the bill that I call the Mary Harding bill, but it prohibits a public entity from using public money to make contributions to another candidate. I'm going to give you just a little background on this bill and how it came to be. There's an entity that is essentially owned by the REAs. It was put together many, many years ago as an entity that would do the negotiating between the public power entities and the REAs. So it's funded by fees that are assessed by the REAs and funded into the fund. It's called the Nebraska Generation and Transmission Association. Last year, they set up a PAC, and they took the dues that run the organization are paid for by consumers like me who live out in rural Nebraska and belong to an REA. So we pay our monthly fees for electricity, and the money goes to the REA. Part of that money is channeled off to go to the Generation and Transmission Fund. And so this year, the Generation and Transmission Fund set up a PAC. I think they raised around $7,300, or they took $7,300 as a loan from G&T and applied that to races for public power, including Mary's case. Obviously, that's just an inappropriate use of ratepayers' dollars to engage in politics. Let the ratepayer make his decision on that. So Senator Kavanaugh has introduced this bill to prohibit that activity. which I think is a good bill. What we always say about the generation and transmission group is that they don't generate any electricity and they don't transmit any of it, but they're just a middleman. LB 483 is another bill by Senator Kavanaugh. It calls for a climate study and an action plan. If you remember back in 2014, the legislature asked for a bill, or Senator Hart put forward a bill to study climate change. I think that the caveat with that bill was the language was offensive to some people because I think it said man-made climate change, and some were offended by that. So Senator Hart was going to pull the bill then, and the university agreed to step up and actually run the study themselves, and they did so. So this bill of Senator Kavanaugh's will update that study following opportunities to pursue renewable energy. It calls for strengthened property rights. It's to develop a sort of an evidence-based, data-driven strategic action plan for the state to provide methods for adapting to and mitigating impacts of extreme weather. Ask for a carbon footprint of Nebraska to be developed, sets measurable goals, assesses the risks and the opportunities that are out there, and looks at the potential economic impact, both positive and negative. Also studies the water resources, public health, energy generation, et cetera. So it's sort of an all-inclusive piece to update the plan and then ask for intensive public involvement, input from experts in ag and natural resources, and also to take a look at what other states are doing. The funding for the study will be coming from the Petroleum Rebate Fund, Action Collection Fund, which is about $250,000. So again, this bill is going to natural resources, so it's another heavy lift, but it's a good goal, and I think we all need to get behind this. This is one thing, if we can get the plan updated from 2014. I was there when that was conducted and saw the university study. They did a presentation out at Innovation Campus, and it was very sobering and really convinced me that we had some issues that we had to deal with soon. Now we're, 7 years later, 6 years later, we haven't addressed those in a significant manner. We've worked around the edges a little bit, but we can't really put this off. And the study, I think, will make Nebraskans confront the issues.
I'll just add that we're one of a minority of states that does not have a climate change plan, official one. So that's another thing. It's hard to get people even use the words climate change, but that's why it's going to be a tough one in the committee the way it's set up now.
Yeah, Chris Clayton is an ag economist that I read, or journalist that I read, and about a year ago he said, I've become completely convinced that this is legitimate, and the studies that he was looking at were implying that North Platte, Nebraska would be the same temperature as Lubbock, Texas today in about 30 years. So when I look at the state of Nebraska and the sand hills, which are so vulnerable, I can't imagine what a much warmer climate would do to that terrain. And, blowing sand will, once it gets started, it doesn't stop easily. And in 2012, we had such a hot, dry summer that year when I was campaigning, and we did see grass actually dying out in the hills. So it's very much concerning to me. So there is an A bill that will go with that. I didn't bring that up tonight, but it's $250,000 for that, which is, I think, a modest amount of funding. LB 507 was introduced by Senator Bostelman. Do you want to bring those up, David? The mead ethanol issues, the article? Or do you want me to talk about it first? You're muted.
It's up there. You can go ahead and talk.
Okay. just shortly before session began, the Guardian newspaper, which I think is a British paper, came out with an article about the ethanol plant at Meade, Nebraska, and some of the things that are happening there. And so I was contacted by, I think, a member of the Sierra Club and a member of the Climate Plan that we callers that we meet on every Monday about this plant, and read the article and was extremely shocked at what's gone on there at Meade. So in a nutshell, seed corn is treated with something that's known as a nanonicotinoid. It's, I think, an antifungal, and it's put on the seed. Farmers plant the seed, the corn grows, and everything is great. But at the end of the season, there is a lot of seed corn that's left over, which apparently loses its germination ability rather quickly, so you can't reuse that at the next year. So this ethanol plant at Meade has been taking all this nanonicotinoid treated seed corn, turning it into ethanol. Not sure if everybody knows much about the ethanol industry, but the byproduct of ethanol is something that's called dry distiller's grain. It's a tremendous cattle feed and is widely used across the state of Nebraska. So obviously this Meade plant produces the same waste product, which is what DDG is when you're done with ethanol, but it's treated with the nanonicotinoids, and so it's not you can't feed that to cattle or any other animal because it's somewhat toxic, quite toxic. So essentially what's happened at Meade is this has been just dumped on the ground there. They've had a number of violations, as I understand it, including failure of their retention ponds. The water has run out of those. They've dumped the material on the ground. It smells terrible. The research farm that is right beside that ethanol plant began to notice that there were bee colony collapses. And a woman in Meade noticed that her dogs were, I think, acting unusually. So people have begun to focus on some of the impacts to the community out there. And eventually this thing surfaced, and Senator Bostelman had to introduce the bill. So his bill is LB 507. It goes to the Natural Resources Committee also. And what it does is it has language. And I'm just going to read the language to you. The use of treated seed corn in the production of ethanol or ethyl alcohol shall be prohibited if it results in the generation of a byproduct that is deemed unsafe for livestock consumption or land application. I mean, it has an emergency clause, which would mean it would take effect on the signature of the governor. Now, the problem with it is the ethanol plant may take bankruptcy, but it's going to have to be cleaned up out there. And we need to be sure that something is done to protect the water table. I don't believe there's any kind of a liner underneath this stuff, so when it rains, it runs into the ground. I was told by my friend who lives out there that they were applying the product to the fields, but then they were ordered by the Department of Natural Resources to pick that all back up. So obviously there's a lot of concern about it. And, you know, if it gets into the water table, it will get into humans and your animals, but also into all the vegetation that's out there. One of the things in my research on this, I was reading about bees, and it said what happens to the bees is it disturbs their sleep cycle. So they are essentially awake at night and sleeping during the daytime. So it's obviously something we need to focus on, and I'm not sure that Bostelman's bill goes far enough, but it's certainly a start. LB 634 is Senator John Kavanaugh's bill, which also deals with the same issue. It was introduced at my request, and by Ken Winston. So it's the same principle, but this bill changes the focus from the product to liability. So what it provides for is that if the seed companies who are making the nanonicotinoids and applying them to their seed corn are disposing of the product in an improper way, which is what they're doing when they are selling it or giving it away to this Planet Meat, then they will be held liable in a civil action for the cleanup and for the unsafe disposal. The first bill, Bostelman's bill, goes to Natural Resources. He is the chairman of that committee, so I would imagine it has a fairly good chance of passing. A lot of pressure coming from his district. Senator Kavanaugh's bill is going to Judiciary. Because of the makeup of that committee, I think we have a good chance of getting the bill onto the floor also. So we could have two bills that come to the floor on this issue. Following this, then, I intend to try to convince someone to introduce a resolution to study the damages to the environment that are taking place at Mead. You know, we need to do some testing of the water and the plants to be sure that the product is not just spreading willy-nilly out there. But I want to get these two bills to the floor first so we can have all the groundwork laid that the legislature will think this is an important and urgent thing.
And I'll just add, excuse me, that we are in touch with people at UNL and One Health Nebraska, which is also an entity in UNL that studies the interaction of animals, environment, and humans. And the woman, Dr. Judy Wu Smart, who is mentioned in the Guardian article, we are in touch with her. Of course, when you work for the universities, sometimes you have to get clearance before you can speak. So she may be able to speak on behalf of the university, or she may just speak on behalf of herself, or depending on whether she's up for tenure or not. I don't know if she is. She might not be able to speak at all. So we do have outreach for people who have been studying the issue itself.
And I really suspect the university would be fully behind the work that's being done here. You know, because the research farm is right next door. So it's going to be dealing with ramifications of this if we don't do something about it. I don't think this is you know, I'm not sure that this is Nebraska's Flint, Michigan, but I mean, it's not a good thing. The last bill that we are taking a position in opposition to is Senator Mike Flood's bill, which adopts the Nebraska Geological Storage of Carbon Dioxide Act. It's a long, wordy bill setting up a bunch of principles, ideas, and a plan for storing carbon dioxide deep in the ground underneath the layers of shale. I was on a conference webinar the other day with Senator Flood and several other folks. The leadoff individual who began talking about the bill was Mr. Bredenkamp, who was the head of the Nebraska ethanol industry for a long time, now is in DC. I believe this bill is being brought by the ethanol industry. So when people ask me why Senator Flood is introducing it, I think it's because of Nucor being in Norfolk. Nucor has a huge carbon footprint. And essentially, in the webinar where they talked about the geology, about pipelines, can you pipe it? No, you can't pipe it, but you could pipe it, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to find other ways to inject it. There are some issues with property rights, and you wonder about fracking. Also, the states that have really looked at this are, from what I can tell, essentially oil states. North Dakota, Wyoming, Louisiana, and Texas were 4 of those. So Senator Flood is making it out as though this is, we need to get at the forefront of this, and this will be really good for the state. I believe Sierra Club the National has looked at the issue. I'm not sure exactly what their position is, and they've kind of come out on both sides of it. So we need to clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just add a little bit. One of the concerns is that it's a diversion against cutting back on carbon because if you can say, well, we're going to put it all underground again, so it doesn't matter how much we use. So that's one big concern about it. Second is how much it costs compared to how much clean energy costs. So those are two of the major issues.
In the webinar, the implication was that ultimately it would be beneficial to the state of Nebraska because states like California that have much more rigorous rules on clean air and clean energy essentially will subsidize the construction of these facilities in the Midwest through fees of some kind. I think that's to be seen yet, whether that happens or not, but that was the implication of the call. But it's a completely new idea, and it's something that we need to really think through before we enact it. And as to the property right piece of it, these gases, if you shove them down 3,000 feet, they're probably not going to stay within a specific defined field. They're going to be moving out through fault lines underground and things. So I'm not sure how you handle the property right issue. They did talk about that though extensively. So those are the bills that we are working on. There are a lot of other ones that we are taking a position on, which will be support letters or opposition letters or neutral letters. There are some, I always say there's some crazy bills that are out there. There are a couple of them that are wanting to move the Game and Parks headquarters one to Sidney, Nebraska, and one to a county with less than 10,000 people, 200 miles from Lincoln. So I don't think either of those bills have any chance of getting anywhere, but they're obviously, some senator had a gripe with Game and Parks, and it was an I'll show you Game and Parks piece. Game and Parks seems to have a number of issues this year. One of Senator Erdman's bills would put Game and Parks commissioners on an elected basis by district, which sounds like a good idea, but the fact is that then they have to earn 50% of their income from agriculture. So you can see that that would eliminate a lot of folks in Omaha and Lincoln, where the majority of the population is. I'm thinking that's another one of those spite bills, but you have to watch all those things. And LB 406 is one that I did send a letter on this week. 406 was a bill by Senator McDonald to have a new study about building 4 or 5 flood control lakes or flood control projects on the Platte River. I think most of you know that we've already been down that road before with discussion of a dam at Ashland, which most people aren't in favor of, but I think this bill was put together by some developers who thought we could probably make some money and have some beautiful lakefront homes out there if we could just get the thing built. But of course, they bring in a lot of issues like hydropower. This will be green energy, et cetera, et cetera. Any questions?
Thank you, Al.
You're welcome.
There is a list of all the ones. These are the ones you heard tonight are our priority bills. There's a list of all of them on the website, and you can click over there, the same place where this meeting was announced, that same link. I wanted to just talk about, and I know that Al has testified. Would you just say a little bit about the Lancaster County zoning?
Yes. So, Lancaster County some years ago put through a very restrictive zoning regulations on wind, which has basically stopped all wind energy development in the county. That I believe was 2015. I was there the day that happened, and I thought we had it in the bag that they weren't going to do that, but something happened between the commissioners and they ended up putting in extremely restrictive covenants. So the commissioners have been thinking this through. It's a new mix of commissioners who are a little more focused on renewables. And they asked the Planning Commission to reconsider the 2015 plans. So that took place a week and a half ago, or a week ago. I submitted testimony to that. We did that on a Zoom basis, and there were, I suppose, half a dozen proponents to making the change. I didn't stick around for the entire debate because I knew what was going to be coming, but then there were a couple of hours of not in my backyard folks. So now the Planning Commission recommended no changes. Now the issue will come before the county commissioners. It was supposed to be next week. I think it's been put off to the 9th of February now. And I will again go through the Zoom process and submit my testimony. The issues in Lancaster County, there are a couple of them. One was they essentially let landowners designate 3 acres somewhere where they might someday build a home. Well, if that happens, then you have to work with the setback rules against that. So, a place could, it's a piece of farm ground right now. It always has been a piece of farm ground, but I might build a house there someday. Oh, well, we can't put wind energy there by that. And I said, well, from my perspective, it's either farm ground or it isn't. There's no special category for that. And so that needs to go away. The other issues deal with sound abatement issues, and the sound is the kind of sound and flicker are the boogeymen of the anti-winders. So the wind, the sound, the decibels that are in statute are so low. I said when the wind blows right outside your windows, 10, 15 miles an hour, it's louder than the wind from those turbines. When your furnace filter is running, it's louder than the wind from those turbines. But that is the issue that the anti-winders are able to move with. So we are looking to try to change that and raise that up. I believe it's 38 decibels now. The average around the country is 50, and the Lancaster County recommendation, or the pro-wind people were recommending 45, which is somewhat in between at the hearing the other day. But we could use letters of support to Lancaster County. Here's one of the reasons I think it's a good example, a good reason to do this is that Lancaster County sets a good example for the rest of the state. So I'm from Cherry County, and you might know that there's been a lot of controversy about wind in Cherry County. It's a big county, and there's some parts of it that are perfect for wind. But after Lancaster County introduced their regulations, Cherry County adopted many of the same ones. So have other counties that are trying to restrict wind energy development. So if Lancaster County would relax these standards, I think it would send a message to the rest of the state that, it's okay to have a little more liberal rules.
So Al, there's some questions in the chat, and Aaron has asked, are only Lancaster County residents being asked to submit testimony?
I don't believe so, but I think they will ask for your address.
Yes, but let me just say this. You can accept them from anyone. Of course, they would carry more weight if you live in Lancaster County, but Sierra Club obviously represents people from all over the state, and some of you might be in other organizations that represent people that live in Lancaster County. So if your organization is willing to let you speak on their behalf, that would carry a bit more weight. Or if you're an expert on the reasons why these aren't good. I'm working with the Public Health Association of Nebraska. I used to be on their board and was president at one time. So I'm asking them if I have permission to give testimony on their behalf. So if they, I don't know what I'm going to hear from them because they kind of got their hands full right now with COVID. So I don't know if they're going to be paying any attention to these other issues right now. but at least I'm going to attempt that. I do belong to a national organization, and I will speak on behalf of being advisory board to the Center for Climate Health and Equity. So things like that would be helpful. And what Al was saying too about oftentimes what happens in Lincoln or Omaha carries a lot of weight for the other states, because they kind of say, well, if this is what they did, we might do that. Of course, there's times when they say, if that's what they do, we're not going to do that. But the Lincoln climate change plan, which I have a link to here, an article about it, is an example of how the state might use this as an example. So if people say, well, what's this 483 and what should we do about it? We could look to Lincoln and say, well, here's what Lincoln's doing and here's what kind of plans they have. These are the similar kinds of things we could do for the state. So it's important that some set precedents for others.
Another question in the chat is from Glenn. Have we looked at LB 91?
I did look at that. Is that the seed one?
Yes, it is.
I did look at it. I didn't think it was particularly pertinent, but go ahead and give me your thoughts.
Well, it's for people doing restoration, prairie restoration work. It gives them a bit of a commercial seed has a different germination rate than native seeds. They take longer to germinate, and this allows the native seed to be registered as certified seed. It gives a lot more latitude to folks doing restoration work with native grasses and seeds. It's technical change that got bogged down last year in the whole mess, but it'd be good if that went through for those people who are interested in that, as me.
Well, that's the reason why we have these things too, so we can learn things from things that we may have missed. So Glenn, my email is there and Al's email is there on the list. And so, you know, it's something that the legislative committee can talk about. We have a legislative committee meeting tomorrow. And we always know that these things that we take, we do are kind of quick studies, and we may have to either add or take something off or change, sometimes even change the stance that we have on it based on information that we found since we first voted on it. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Glenn, for that. It's a very important bill.
And there's a question from Sharon. Are there any hearings coming next week?
Yes, there are a whole slew of them. I don't have a list of them yet. I mean, I could print that off, but you can take a look at the legislative website. There's a particular box that lists all the hearings for next week. I'm thinking that of the bills that we have listed, there are probably 6 of them next week. There have been, I think I submitted letters to 4 or 5 this week. So we're getting right into it.
Right, and just the quickest way is just do a quick Google search, put in Nebraska legislature, and that page will pop up. That's where you can see the full bills. That's where you can see what senators on which committee. It's a very good website. And there's also a place where you can get legislative updates emailed to you on a daily basis. So if you're really interested in it, you can keep track of that. So and it lists all the committee meetings that are scheduled to date. So very good website.
And Sharon also asks if we want to submit a letter in support or opposition, who do we send the message to? Is that something Sierra Club will be letting people know when there's bills that are priority bills that they're coming up and you want us to submit letters to the people on the committee, or how's that going to work?
David, I'll talk a little bit about the process first, if you don't mind, and then you can maybe finish the question. To get back to the hearings, on the side, you can go to the calendar, and then you can there's a particular place where you can download the week's hearing schedules, and I would suggest you do that. But if you want to submit testimony, there are a number of ways to do that. Of course, you can testify in person, just like they always have done. The hearing rooms are really restricted, so I think what they're trying to do is they put people in, and then you kind of work on out. The second opportunity is to submit testimony, which will be in the record. That testimony has to be actually delivered to the committee between 8:30 and 9:30 on the day of the hearing, and it will become a part of the record. If you wonder why they did it that way, this is a design to kind of help stuff get in the record, but keep people from being exposed to COVID-19. Then there's a third approach, which is to submit a letter. And through that one, you have to email that to the committee email, which is something that I had really never used before, but there is a committee email. So it'd be the natural resources email, and you can find a list of those on the legislative website. The caveat to that is that letter has to be submitted by noon the day before the hearing. So if you have a hearing Monday, that means you have to have that document in the hands of the committee clerk by noon on Friday. So there's a lot of lead time to that. The fourth option is new this year, and it's an online little drop-down menu. You can put your name and everything into that, and then you have 300 words to give your point. That piece does not become part of the official record, but it is always available for staff and the senators to read. So that's kind of how that part of it works. It's all laid out on the website, just like David said. And I guess it's kind of such a change that you might want to look at it twice. All those approaches, you have to make sure that you have your address, your name, email, and those sort of things, or they won't accept it. So it's a little bit nitpicky, but I think it's the best they could do in light of the situation. Now, as to mailing them out to people, David, you can tell me how that's done.
Well, what I'm wondering, Al, is if on the ones that you hand deliver, if we had them from somebody else, could you also deliver those?
Yes, I think so.
So if you wanted to send me or Al or both of us that letter, then we can make sure that it gets to them. Then it is part of the official record, and you'd be assured that it's there. Now, many of us on this are at a higher risk for COVID, and Al's among that group. So he wants to, on our priority, he's going to actually be there. I don't know how you're getting the letters to them. Are you delivering those now?
So I delivered some this morning. I've been using the committee email for most of them, but I did deliver some this morning because I didn't get them written by noon yesterday. I was sort of waiting on trying to make a decision about one specific bill as to what we should do, and I decided I would wait and just deliver them in the morning.
So when you do the committee email, does that mean it goes to everybody on the committee then, so you don't have to worry about the number of copies?
No, I think so. That's the other thing. When you deliver them in the morning, you have to have the 12 copies. If you use the committee email, you don't have to have the 12 copies. I'm trying to find that on the site here. I'm just.
Are you talking about the
public input? Here we go. Let's see. So the position letter, that's what they call the one that has to be in by noon the day before. So if you get to this page, public hearings, you can go down to the section on that. It says in-person testimony, written testimony in lieu of the person testimony. That's what I did this morning. And then the position letter is the third option. That would be, if I were going to make a suggestion, I would suggest people use the position letter approach.
And maybe One of you can give us the link for that.
Yeah. Tell me, I'm on that page now, so I can show them. Can you talk me through it there? Is it under,
Are you on the public hearing page, David?
no,
Oh,
that's,
I'm on that, yes,
okay, where is it?
I'm gonna
Steve,
put it in
You go
the,
down, there's a little tan box and in-person testimony. And then the second one is written testimony in lieu of person testimony. Third one is position letter, and the fourth one is submission of online comments.
So
Are
you're
you
on it,
seeing?
Mary?
I sent the link in the chat there. And yeah, there's the in-person and then the written. And then there's the position letter.
Yeah, I was on it, but I forgot where I found it.
It's in the chat.
No, I mean, on the webpage. I've been there before, but now I don't remember where I went to get it. But yeah, we can make that available.
I think that's the easiest way for most people to make comments. But, you know, there are little hoops you have to jump through in order to get there.
Barry, can you put that up on the screen?
It's in the chat. If you look at the chat.
Yeah, I know, but if people wanted to see it, could you not put it up on the screen?
Let's see. I think I can do that. Let me see, just a sec.
I'm doing it right now.
Are you doing it, David?
Yes.
Okay.
So here it is. Thanks to your link, Mary. So you can see what that full address is, the one that Mary put on the chat. So you might want to copy that so that you have it.
Do you have it up yet, David?
Yeah, it's up
We
there.
don't see it, David. You haven't shared it on the.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
showing.
we're not seeing it.
Or what
Yeah,
happened to
we're
my
not
share?
seeing
I don't know so you mean all this time I've been going through the legislative pages, you haven't been seeing it?
We've been seeing
Correct. We just see
Yeah.
the Word document.
the document you started with.
There you go. There you go.
So if you scroll down, then you get to the written testimony. There's the position letter
And then if you can click on that, David, you can open that up, his position letter.
right there, yeah.
And there are the rules. So you see the list of committee emails. You click on that link and that gives you the particular committee that you want. So if it's ag, it's like AR, there you go. So ag is AGRPL.
Oh, that's
the-
great. So then, Al, will you be letting people know when it would be a good time to write letters in support or opposition to different bills?
I can do that. I've been kind of keeping David informed and maybe between the two of us, we can work out how to do that.
Yeah, the difficulty is that there's usually a lot going on. And so it's also helpful if others are used to working with the page, and so that you can do this. I mean, obviously we have an official Sierra Club stance on many of the bills, but then anybody can personally weigh in on these. And this new way, I haven't used this before in the past, is a good way to get a hold of all of the members of the committee that's in charge of any particular bill.
For the bills that we have targeted, is there a way to put like our position, you know, our points that we want to make, if we're going to put a position letter up?
You mean to share the letters that Al's already written, or the ones that he's going to write?
Not necessarily. The ones that are coming up, if there just was some information that we could write in our own words, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, if I'll go back to the Sierra Club page, and I can put it here under legislative updates on our webpage. So if
Okay.
Al wants to send me those, then I can make them as an attachment as a document. Just like right here, it says, this is that, if you click this, you'll see a PDF of the long list of bills that we have taken a stand on, not just our top priorities. And so we can do that the same way. And if you recall, in the past, we put a week in review, what happened in the week before, and then that usually tells also what's coming up the next week. So
Right.
that's the best way. And those have always been put on the front page of our webpage so that it's easier for people to find it.
Yeah. So you're going to start doing that this week?
As soon as I get the first week in review, it'll be up there.
All right.
So
Right.
So I just want to make sure I understand what you need, David, and when you need it. I will try to get through the
Yeah.
hearings next week and get you a schedule of those.
Yeah, Al,
Sometime
we can talk about that tomorrow at our 4:00 meeting, just so that we don't,
Okay.
but we'll work out those details then.
Okay,
but then I guess the part I'm wondering, if there's a call to action for our members to contact people, then how would that work?
Well, we can email people, but the Albert's the expert on what we have to do to email and what steps we have to go through. So it's not always a timely thing, right, Albert?
That, David, I think is if you're emailing the entire Missouri Valley group, right? I
Right.
mean, I guess at one point I thought the chapter was going to try and get more of a legislative, what we used to call our legislative phone tree, but get,
Yeah, well, that's one thing. That's one thing I said at the beginning of this. If anybody on this meeting wants to get more involved, then send me or Al your email, and then we will make sure that you get more information. So you're right, on that kind of email, we don't have to go through it. If we want to go to the large groups, then there's a time lag because it has to go to national and get approved, and then they schedule it.
right.
It's about 3 days right now it's running.
Yeah, and 3 days in legislative time is a long time.
That's pretty slow. So if people are interested in getting updates and knowing what's happening currently, then the best thing is to email David or Albert to get put on a list.
And it would really help if somebody's an expert like Glenn on that seed issue is willing to help put together the position letter. It's great to have that expertise helping us out.
I agree, Clyde.
Any other questions?
On LB 91, I just emailed Kay Codas, who's going to send me a outline, and I'll send that to you tomorrow then, David, on LB 91.
Yeah, make sure Al gets it. Put us both on it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and Glenn, if you just put down your thoughts on the bill, that will be helpful too.
All right.
Is anything else anybody wants to ask? If not, thank you all for being involved. Obviously, this is a meeting we have every year. This is the first time we've had it virtually. And normally we're at the First United Methodist Church for these meetings. But one thing it does allow is that for people from all over the state to join us, and you don't have to just be in the Omaha area to be involved in the meetings. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are going on, and just so that everybody knows, the only two paid people that we have in the Sierra Club are our lobbyist, Al, and we have a community organizer in Lincoln, Ken Winston. all the rest of us are volunteers. So we need all the help we can get from people who are willing to get involved in legislative issues. And although we emphasized the state, there are times, as we use the example of Lancaster County, and there are times when we get involved, just as we did with the trash hauling in Omaha and all of those kind of issues, where we take a pretty big stand on some local issues, but we can't take a stand if we don't know they're happening. So it's always good to have more people involved and let us know what's going on. Now, this meeting is supposed to be recorded. So I clicked the record automatically, and then so I will make that link known, because I know Kat asked about it, that some people couldn't be here tonight and they might want to see it. So we'll make that link available. Any other things anybody needs to say?
Mark Welsh had a comment. I'm just not sure what he means by that.
Okay, what did it say?
This does not work. Click here for document from the presentation. Is this the document then, Mark?
I can describe that. It's on the right-hand side of the website.
It should be.
I sent the link in the chat. It says it's supposed to be click here for the document from the presentation.
Right here. Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, so
what happens when you?
Is that the link you're talking about?
What happens when you? Yes, right there. When I click on that, it comes up and says that that page doesn't exist.
Oh, it worked before. I'll get that corrected.
When I click on it, I get to the Nebraska Legislature page. When I click the link you put there, Mark.
No, you're talking about this one, Mary. He's talking about this one. There's two links on that same page.
Oh,
so
on the
this
website.
one, I'll get that fixed. When I checked it earlier, it worked. So I don't know what happened.
Okay. Darn computers.
It's the first time I've done it with a Word document, and I didn't think it would work, but then when I did it, it worked. And obviously now it doesn't. So I'll fix that. If I have to, I may have to go to a PDF. I know it works for those. But then you lose the links. You just have to copy them.
Thank you.
I might just put it on the legislative updates page and not worry about you having to download anything. Okay, anything else? All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, especially Al. I appreciate the very informative.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
See y'all.
Bye.